Hello, everyone, and welcome to Body Bags. I'm your reviewer for today. I am Lonnie from Horror Heaven77, and I have to admit, I've been kind of really been into a lot of documentaries lately and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love horror movies. I think you can see that. But yeah, just here lately, I've just been kind of more in a documentary kind of mood, and so yeah, this one here I decided I wanted to talk about. It was a limited series, and this came out from Lionsgate. And it came out in 2012. There's a series called Haunted History, and this is actually a really good series, And I have to admit, I know there's a bunch of these, haunted houses and haunted hospitals and stuff like that. Like Travel Channel, they got a bunch of those and stuff. I'm not really big on like the stuff like Ghost Adventures. I have to admit, just Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, stuff like that. Where just shows where everybody's like standing in an old house. Hey, any ghosts here? Come on, man. Come on, you bitch. Come on, mess with me. Come on. It's like I'm not into that. Or just kind of like the like Ghost Hunters where they're just it's like every time you turn, what was that? 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 I'm not interested in that stuff. I prefer more like the documentaries and kind of they got that, what's it called? Haunt, I think, on Netflix. That show's pretty good, where people tell their stories about the hauntings and things like that they've had to deal with. And I'm much more a fan of that than stuff like Ghost Adventures and everything. You get the idea. I can move on. Anyway, yeah, this is a really interesting show, and unfortunately, I think it maybe only lasted like one season. I haven't seen anything more. Um, I haven't seen like a Haunted History like Volume 2 or Season 2 or any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is actually it's a really good series, and I kind of I really enjoy it. You got 8 episodes altogether. You got the Ghosts of Gettysburg, Salem Witch Trials, The Murder Castle, Lost Souls of Penhurst, Katrina Cannibal, A Deadly Possession, The Torso Murders, and The Manson Murders. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. If you've watched ghost documentaries before, I mean, obviously Ghosts of Gettysburg, talking about how the fields of Gettysburg, they say you could still hear the battle cries of, soldiers who have died in war, died in battle, things like that. Salem witch trials, obviously, you had so many people who were falsely accused of witchcraft. And what was it? 19, I believe, were hung. And then one, Giles Corey, he was pressed to death. And then, so I mean, some of these, like I said, they're pretty self-explanatory. Lost Souls of Penhurst being an old abandoned, hospital / asylum where, all kinds of, bad things took place, so anyway, so just, yeah. So then you get the idea. But some of these are actually interesting. You got the Murder Castle, which was basically it tells the story. The episode is pretty informative. It tells the story about H.H. Holmes and the things that he had done, and how he built this murder castle. And these rooms, they were all designed and rigged up with like ways for people to be killed. Like they were rigged to have like lines of gas that feed in there and kill people, or the rooms were set up to where people could suffocate or things like that. And then, the bodies would go down to the basement where, he would torture and murder, and he would do all kinds of, horrible things to them. And he was into these scams, like for one thing, like he would kill the people, and then he would boil all the skin and flesh off their bones. And then he would turn around and sell the skeletons to like medical schools to make money. And he was into, like insurance scams where he convinced one guy that if he would go in on this insurance scam with him, he would split the money with him, and they had to make it look like he was dead. Well, what Holmes ended up doing was, instead of making it look like this guy was dead, Holmes just killed him and took the insurance money. And then not only that, he turned around and he murdered the guy's children as well. So yeah, just really kind of disturbing on that one. A Deadly Possession, I have to admit, that's the one I don't remember a whole lot of that one. The Torso Murders, that was a series of murders. I want to say back during the Great Depression, where they never found out who did it, and that was one of the intriguing things about this was they never found out who did it. It was a guy who was riding the railroads, and at least that's what they think. And then all these like these people who were riding the trains and people who were homeless and things like that, they kept being found dead or decapitated instead of and basically like the only thing that would be found would be their torsos. So yeah, so they were talking about that and how the trains were haunted and the rail yards. They think they could see ghosts and things like that. So that was a really good one. The Manson murders, that one I think is pretty self-explanatory too, because obviously they've had like documentaries and things like that where oh sorry, just real quick, going back to the H.H. Holmes, The Murder Castle. I keep hearing rumors, and I hope this actually does happen. I keep hearing rumors that Martin Scorsese wants to direct a movie about H.H. Holmes and the murders and the murder castle and everything else, and that DiCaprio is willing to star in it. It's like, I wouldn't mind seeing that if that actually comes to happen. So they do that, I would watch that. Then also too, like H.H. Holmes, like you've seen it, if you watch American Horror Story, you've seen it, because they always like add serial killers and things like that, like in the last season, 1984, they added Richard Ramirez into the storyline. So you get the idea. Anyway, going back to the Manson murders, you had like, like Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring and Stephen Parent, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger. They're not married. They were murdered that one night. And then, they've had like documentaries and things like that made about it where like neighbors have talked about that they've seen and like heard the ghosts. One person said that he saw in his home, he saw the ghost of Jay Sebring, and even the ghost even said something to the effect of "I had big plans," and things like that. And so yeah, that one's very interesting. And they talk about what was really interesting was when they talk about the story about Sharon Tate, that before I think it was like 3 years before she was murdered, that she was living with Jay Sebring in a house, and Jay Sebring, he went off for something, and so she was in the house by herself. And what was the name of the producer? I'm sorry, the name escapes me now, but the Paul Byrne, I think it was. Anyway, so she's in the house asleep. Well, one night she wakes up in the middle of the night and she sees this ghost kind of like walking around in the bedroom, and he leaves. And so she goes downstairs and she sees tied to a banister a beautiful blonde woman who looked very much like Sharon Tate. And she had been just brutally like butchered. She was tied to the banister. Her throat was cut. And Sharon was, supposedly so disturbed by that whole thing that she ended up, she went and she got herself a drink and she started like peeling some of the wallpaper because she was, really scared and nervous. But eventually she was able to calm her nerves and go back to bed. And everybody always said that was, Sharon having, that was Sharon having a premonition of her own murder. So, they talk about those things on here. And yeah, and then the other one, the Katrina Cannibal, that was a pretty interesting story about a man named Zach and his girlfriend Addie, I believe that's her name. And back when Hurricane Katrina came in, they met. He was a bartender. He wanted to be a drummer in a band. He had gone to war. He had gone in the army. He had gone to war, but he had been traumatized by it, and so he came back and he just had not been right, and he wanted to get a job as a band or a drum player in a band, and it wasn't really panning out. But he ended up getting a job as a bartender. And he met this girl, Addie, and the two of them fell in love and got into a relationship and things. And then when Hurricane Katrina came along, they decided, rather than evacuate with everybody else, they decided they were going to stay there and just ride the whole thing out. And so they did. And, for days, maybe even weeks, I forget how long it was, they had the French Quarter to themselves pretty much. And So they were just enjoying it, and just having fun and hanging out with the other people who decided to ride it out. And they pretty much had run of the city. They could do whatever they wanted. And so they were happy until things started getting back to normal and everybody was starting to come back, and things were starting to go back to the way they were. And apparently Zach had a mental breakdown and he couldn't handle it. And at one point he murdered Addie, and he ended up cooking parts of her. What was it? I think they had like her torso was in the fridge or something. Like her head, I think, was in a pot on the stove. You get the idea. And he had gone pretty much. Zach had lost his mind, and he had spray painted things on the walls and everything else, and ultimately he couldn't handle it anymore, and he took his own life. And people found out the horrible things he had done, and then they talk about they think because New Orleans is such a place of high spiritual energy and things like that. They talk about that, they think that spirits might have played a part in this, and that, he might have not really known what he was doing. And maybe he was possessed when he killed her. Maybe it was the spirits messing with him and taking over his mind and things like that. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, this is a really good series. I really enjoy it. This is like this is like comfort watching for me. I can just put it on and like I said, yeah, I mean, of course, obviously I love my horror movies and stuff, but just here lately, I don't know. I've just been more in a documentary mood. I've been wanting to watch more documentaries and stuff. So, but anyway, so there you go. So, if anybody took the time to watch this, I thank you for doing it, and I appreciate you for doing it. I also hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the Body Bags channel. We have a different reviewer for every day of the week. I'm the Saturday reviewer. We got a lot of great guys. They're all doing great stuff. Yeah, so, please come on back and check out another episode of Body Bags, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.